give the floor to the distinguished representative of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Thank you, Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. St. Vincent and the Grenadines has been closely following the developments in the war currently raging in the Syrian Arab Republic. We have been alarmed and revolted by the scenes and stories emanating from the war. The small but vibrant Syrian and Lebanese community within our country is also directly and often personally affected by the spiraling violence and atrocities in Syria, particularly as the war has moved to the major cities of Damascus and Aleppo. On the 31st of May 2012, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines made a statement to our national parliament condemning the massacre that took place in the region of El Hula in western Syria and calling unequivocally for the perpetrators to be held accountable and brought to justice. It is in this spirit of genuine outrage, alarm and revulsion that St. Vincent and the Grenadines views the current resolution on the situation in the Syrian Arab Republic. Today's resolution has many positive elements that St. Vincent and the Grenadines enthusiastically supports. We share the resolution's concern for the civilian victims of this war, particularly the innocent women and children who have been killed or victimized by the warring parties. We are similarly concerned about the influx of Syrian refugees to neighboring states. Above all, we echo the resolution's expression of profound regret at the thousands of deaths and extend heartfelt condolences to the affected families. St. Vincent and the Grenadines also wholeheartedly endorses the reaffirmation of support for the six-point peace plan delineated by outgoing Special Envoy Kofi Annan and the commitment to the sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity of the Syrian Arab Republic. We likewise condemn any and all human rights abuses being committed by any party in Syria and support efforts towards extending humanitarian assistance to the affected populations. St. Vincent and the Grenadines also strongly reiterates the importance of the resolution's call for political dialogue and peaceful settlement of this spiraling conflict, which does not appear to have a military solution. However, Mr. President, other aspects of the resolution give us pause and cause us to question whether our laudable desire to speak and act on this matter has caused us to overlook many of the indisputable facts on the ground of this conflict and many of the principles that undergird our organization. Primarily, we are concerned about the obvious omissions from this resolution that create not only a lack of balance, but a far more troubling implication that our silence amounts to consent or endorsement of certain actions and actors. It is a documented fact, for example, that elements of the opposition forces have opted to assassinate members of the Syrian government, either individually or through the use of crude bombs that also murder innocent civilians. Surely, the international community cannot catalog the violations of the Syrian authorities while turning a blind eye to the type of despicable terrorism that we have condemned in every other context and every other nation. We are also aware of the indisputable presence and activity of Al-Qaeda and other extremists in Syria and their role in some of the anti-government activity. We must unambiguously condemn this element in the conflict, for history has taught us the danger of ignoring Al-Qaeda when their interests may align, however fleetingly, with those of other more civilized actors. Instead of outright condemnation of the barbaric elements, this resolution encourages cohesion among all elements of the Syrian opposition, many of whom the international community knows nothing about. There are many principled and patriotic Syrians who seek to staunchly oppose the government through peaceful and legitimate means. It is irresponsible for us to ask these groups to find common cause with those extremists and terrorists who may also clothe themselves in the opposition banner. Similarly, Mr. President, we note that this resolution has been brought under Agenda Item 34, entitled Prevention of Armed Conflict. As such, we feel it imperative for this resolution to acknowledge the role played by many states to exacerbate and intensify armed conflict in Syria through the provision of arms and ammunition to all sides in the war. The international community cannot call for the prevention of armed conflict without confronting the continuing role played by those who persist in arming and supplying all of the combatants. If we are honest about seeking an end to hostilities, it is our collective responsibility to call on the arms suppliers to cease their trade in the tools of death. Our silence on this crucial point is tantamount to an endorsement and encouragement of illicit arms traders and runs counter to the spirit of the recently concluded month-long effort to secure a global arms trade treaty. We cannot simply pay lip service to the ideas of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and non-interference. They are the principles upon which this assembly is founded. If it is that we seek to depart from those principles, it must not be done with a nod and a wink or benign neglect, but with a frank examination of their applicability in our modern context. St. Vincent and the Grenadines is also concerned about the failure to call for a simultaneous ceasefire and pullback by both government and opposition forces and militias. To call for the administration to withdraw its forces to its barracks in the face of advancing opposition forces in Damascus and Aleppo is to ask the authorities to cede control of these cities as a prerequisite for political dialogue. Such a position seems to reflect neither the military realities on the ground nor a genuine desire to craft a workable solution to this war. There are other aspects of concern, Mr. President. For example, the responsibility to protect is a concept whose contours and full implications have neither been defined nor agreed upon by the United Nations. Its inclusion in the preamble of this resolution is unnecessarily divisive at a time when unity should be our objective. We also note the resolution's call for the establishment of, quote, a democratic, pluralistic political system in which all citizens are equal, unquote. St. Vincent and the Grenadines proudly possesses such a political system, which we work tirelessly to improve and consolidate. As such, we have considerable sympathy for the sentiment captured by such a call. However, we are unclear as to whether the General Assembly has the legal, moral, or historical authority to externally impose any political system upon the citizens of another state. Given these concerns, and despite our unambiguous support for many of the key pillars of the resolution, St. Vincent and the Grenadines must regrettably abstain in today's vote. St. Vincent and the Grenadines agonized long and hard over the decision to abstain, and we regret that an opportunity was missed today for the General Assembly to speak with one voice on this conflict, which we all deplore and which we all want to end as quickly and as peacefully as possible. Even in light of the welcome recent changes made to the text, our failure to make the extra effort to craft a resolution that could enjoy near unanimous support is even more regrettable in the wake of yesterday's statements by outgoing Special Envoy Kofi Annan, in which he cited the disunity of the international community as one of the factors contributing to the deepening crisis in Syria. Special Envoy Annan made clear that the international community must be balanced in its pronouncements and united in its approach if we are to save Syria from further bloodshed. It is in these areas, balance and unity, that we feel more work could have been done to capture our collective horror and desire for change. Similarly, Mr. Annan's other underlying message, that authorities who show little concern for the loss of their citizens' lives will lose the moral authority to govern, is also an essential point to which St. Vincent and the Grenadines readily subscribes. Today, even while abstaining, St. Vincent and the Grenadines adds its voice to the chorus of responsible states calling for, 1, the immediate cessation of all violence between and among all parties to the conflict, 2, the commencement of an inclusive political process geared towards a locally crafted and negotiated solution to the conflict, and 3, the avoidance of any actions by other parties that will exacerbate the violence, make a negotiated solution more difficult, or serve as a pretext for military intervention or undue external influence in the sovereign affair of states. Mr. President, our abstention must neither be taken as support for the Syrian authorities nor an endorsement of the opposition's methods. Instead, it is a call for balance, compromise, and unity. As such, St. Vincent and the Grenadines reiterates its support for a peaceful solution to this war that is not motivated by geopolitical or strategic interests, but driven instead by the honest desire to end the catastrophic human tragedy and the need to honor the memory of the tens and thousands of Syrians who have needlessly and tragically died in this conflict. I thank you very much, Mr. President.
I now give the